we're going to take the dash pad, what we normally call the dash cover, off of a 300D. It's actually off of a 123. They're all the same, the 300Ds, the 240s, so forth, the 280Es. The dash cover, there's any number of reasons to take it off. The primary reason that most people have is that center vent vacuum element, the thing that operates the flap that allows air to pass through those two center vents. Eventually that diaphragm, that rubber diaphragm, wears out, and so you see them all the time running around where the center vents don't work, and it's a very difficult vacuum element to get to. About the only way is to take off the dash pad, the dash cover, what we normally in the U.S. call the dash cover. So that's what we're going to look at. There's any number of other things that could be underneath there that you want. One of them is the heater core. If the heater core ever rots out, eventually wears out, starts leaking antifreeze or coolant, the only way to replace it is to pull that dash pad off, and that's where you get access to it. So there's some things under there of interest. It won't take us that long to pull it off, but it will take a few tools. If we look, I've got an assortment of screwdrivers. Mostly I've got most of these screwdrivers just for general purposes, but there are a couple that are of particular interest. One of them is a very short, small Phillips. There is a screw where the loudspeaker cover is, and it takes a Phillips that's very small, and also the head of it is real small. I don't know the number on that head, but it's, you can see relative to a more common Phillips head the difference, and so we need that. Also, to get the speaker out, there are a couple of normal size Phillips screws, like number 2 Phillips I think it is, that are in the very front, that are in a very tight position, and what really helps is to have one of these little angle Phillips screwdrivers. You can buy them for $1 or $2 at the hardware store. And then of course I've got a standard 10mm that's going to be used to take off the oil pressure line, and I've got an 8mm hex that I think there are a couple of screws where we'll use that. We need a knife or a sharp blade. It doesn't have to be a pocket knife, but we need something sharp to remove the glove box, and I'll show you. And then what I do to remove there's a couple of panels that run on the side of the windshield. If you look in the Mercedes book, it says to use a plastic pry bar. Well, what I always do is just take and tape a putty knife so that I don't cut any of the upholstery, and it'll become obvious in a moment what I'm using that for. And then I do have a 24mm socket and a 1/2" drive that's going to be used to remove the nut on the light switch. And then I've just got a standard set of 3/8" drive metric sockets. I think there's a 10mm nut here or there that we might have to remove. I won't use very many of those, maybe not any of them, I can't recall. But let's get started. The first thing we want to do is take out the glove box. It's very easy to do, and then we'll start removing some panels, and we'll have to switch you in different positions because that camera will have to be in various spots to see various things, so we'll have to start and stop quite a few times probably before we're over with because of the position that you'll have to get in with the camera. So let's take a look at the dash cover. Okay, the glove box is really very simple to take out. This is where we need a blade. If we look, there's a little plug. There's actually several of them, about 7 of them. But if we slide a blade underneath there, it comes right out. You see it's a little plug. It's smooth plug. I usually just take them out and throw them in the glove box. And then there's an expandable little insert that you can pry out with a blade, and you see that just pops down in there, and then this insert goes in like that. So there are 7 of those things that we need to take out. 3 on the bottom and 4 on the top. And they come out of there quickly. And actually a couple of them are already missing on the top, so there normally would be 4 of them on the top, and in this particular model someone's taken the glove box out already, which is quite common, and sometimes they lose some of those things. It doesn't take every one to hold them in there. Now once I get once I get that part out, I want to take the light out, and again, you can just pry the little lamp out of there, and then I always just, once I get the glove box out, which from the top, if you pull it down, it has to come underneath there. Then once I get it out, just take that lamp out, put the lamp inside there. And while we're at it, we'll just unplug the little switch, just a little spade connection there that operates that lamp, and we need to take that out while we're there.
If if your glove box lamp burns out, that's the part that needs to be replaced, right?
Sure. Yes, and it's very, see, it's very easy. It's just a little lamp, plugs, comes right out of there.
Okay.
So the little,
So once
I
you
don't
pry
know,
that
it's
out,
about a 10 or 20 watt lamp, maybe less than that, maybe it's 5 watts, let's see. 5 watts. So.
okay.
Okay, so do that. Now, while we're over here on this side, we might as well pull the vent hose from this. Now, these things, I see that this one, and I need to replace this when I pull this dash off. You see that's loose, but normally those hoses just pull right off of there, and we have to pull the hoses off on both sides. Also, while we're here, we might as well take the hose that connects to these two center vents off, and of course these are the things that don't operate right now on this one, and it's very, you can't see, but once we pull this off, we'll show you what we're talking about. It's just a rubber connection that's made there, and so we do need to pull that off, and I got it off this side, and when I pull an instrument panel, I'll pull it off the other side. Now I just set this aside, and next, while I'm on this side, I'll pull off this speaker grill. We need to pull the speaker grill off right here. We also need to pull the speaker out, and then we need to take this piece off. This is just a trim piece along the edge of the windshield and the top of the window, and we'll show you how to get that off. But first, let's take this speaker grill off. I need a little screwdriver. Okay, so now I'm going to use my small little Phillips screwdriver. And there's a little screw, one screw that's about 1 inch long maybe, right there, that holds that speaker grill down. And then set that aside. Use something to sort of pry that speaker grill up, you can see. And it's right underneath that panel. And so if we pull it up and then kind of back, it'll come out of there. So that's the speaker grill. Now what we want to do is take those 4 screws out of that speaker, and that's where that little Phillips, you see how close that is to the windshield? We want to get those screws loose. This takes a little patience because they're in an ugly spot. They're not that tight, they're not difficult, but you just can't get a screwdriver in there unless you use this kind with a 90-degree angle. Okay, now once we get those 2 front screws out, the back screws, the back 2 screws, a stubby, a little short, about a 3-inch long stubby Phillips will fit between the speaker and the windshield, but the stubby won't fit for those front ones. Now, that speaker will just lift right out of there. We may need to put some kind of a blade underneath there to give it a little help. But it'll come right out. My daughter is insisting that that's not a powerful enough speaker for her needs. Now it just unplugs, and we want to just unplug that speaker and set it aside, and we're going to have to do that on both sides. Now, Gordon, while you're up there, you can see there's one 8mm nut, and that's one of the reasons that I had that whole set of nut drivers, but actually it turns out I can get an 8mm nut driver in there, which is of course equivalent to a 5/16 if that's what you have instead. And so it comes right out. And that's one of the things that holds this whole cover down. So on both sides we're going to have to take that little sheet metal screw out of there. So while I'm at it, I just took it off. Okay, now that sort of completes some of the things on this side. We've got a couple more things, but let's go on the other side now and get the instrument cluster out, and of course the bottom kick panels we need to take off. As a matter of fact, while we're on this side, we might as well just do that. The kick panel is real easy to take off, and we have to take them off on both sides. So while we're on this side, all we need is a Phillips and a little blade, and Gordon will have to change positions. Okay, we're going to take this panel off, this kick panel, right underneath your feet or above your feet here. And you see there are three little plastic covers. They're real delicate, so be careful when you take them off with a knife blade. But if you just slide a knife blade underneath them, you can pry them right off. There's three of them. Underneath those things are a Phillips screw, so we need to take that screw out, those three screws. There are a couple of different versions of this kick panel. In the early models, they used a two-piece kick panel. This one, I believe, if I recall, has a one-piece kick panel. No, it's got two pieces too. So this is still the two-piece. On the side there's a little gray screw that just turns. If you turn it like halfway, and put some kind of a, no, maybe that's an actual screw. Can't recall. No, it's you get it out, you'll see it. If you turn it halfway, it'll pull out of there. You see, in one position it's got little ribs on it. So if you twist it, it comes out. Set it on the floor there. There's another one over here that was missing on this particular car. But at any rate, no, this is one of those one-piece panels. So that's the kick panel. It's got insulation all under it, and of course it's got a grill right there. That's where the air is recirculated for the heater. So let me just throw this in the back seat or off to the side. We've got another one on the other side to pull out in a similar way. So also, while we're under here, we might as well take that screw out right there. It has to come off, and there's another one over here on the side. I believe those are 10 millimeters. If we can see that. There's a screw right there. There's a, and I think it might even have a nut. Yeah, it's got a backup nut. It looks like a 10 millimeter. Similarly, there's one on this side that holds this panel. It's also, I believe, a 10 millimeter, and we need to take those off. Perhaps with a socket and an end wrench we can get that. So let me get that socket and end wrench. So we've got a couple of 10 millimeters. It's a nut and a bolt, actually. You have to back it up with a open end wrench, pull it off with a socket in this case. Got a little washer on the side. Drop the nut down here on the floor. Up underneath here, there's another 10 millimeter that attaches this to the side of the car. Can't see it with a camera, but if you feel, you'll be able to get a socket. What I've got is just a socket and a ratchet, and it's a bolt. It's not there's not a nut behind it. See, it's just a little 10 millimeter bolt, but we have to take that out. Now I'm just setting the stuff right now on the floor. This is some kind of a plug. Don't be alarmed. We didn't take it off. It's just for something else that's not attached to this car. So it just it's dangling right there, and don't worry about it. Nothing that we took off. Now this vent came right out of this one. I'm gonna reattach it. You see, somebody tried to pull off the little ring, and it broke the little tangs. The little ring comes out of there, and I'm going to fix it when we pull the dash off, but it's difficult to fix with the dash on there. It goes on there like that, and you can see that there are little tangs that are broken off, and I'm going to have to get a replacement for it. or else I'm going to have to glue that one back, but it's easy enough to do once I get this whole dash out of there. So we'll just set that aside too. Okay, let's go over to the other side and work on the other side for a few.
Okay.
Okay, we need to take the grill, speaker grill, and speaker out on this side. It's the same process. You pull that screw out, there's just one screw, holds the speaker grill in. And then you see the front end of it kind of comes out first, like that. Pulls sort of to the rear. So we take that out, and then we've got that same laborious process with those two front screws. Two front speaker screws are in a real tight spot. We need to take those out of there. So take those out, and then of course the back ones will come out with a stubby screwdriver, so we'll need to do that. That's going to take us a little while. Okay, the next thing we want to do is take these posts out from both sides, and they pry off of there. And this is what I use this this putty knife that's got electrical tape on there. If you pull back the little molding piece and slide this underneath, it's just got a couple little clips. So we want to do the bottom first. Slide it under there, and you can see that it clips. And there's another one on the top. You want to be careful not to break those snaps, those clips. I'm going to kind of move it out from the bottom, and then it pulls out from the top too. So you can see the snaps that hold it in place, and actually the snaps are here too that put pressure on there. So we've got to take those out because they hold this thing down, and we take them out on both sides. So now let's go around to the other side and get the one on the passenger side.
It's inevitable that you bend the VIN number, right?
Yes, that is just, that's part of the process. I probably bent that up a little bit, but that's okay. It's riveted to this steel part of the frame, to the steel part of the frame of the car. It kind of pokes up into the top of that, so you have to take the bottom out and kind of move it toward the windshield and out toward the steering wheel so that it'll come out of the top. All right, so again, I don't want to cut this upholstery, so that's why I have that tape on there. And I need to get back kind of at an angle like that in order to get that knife blade under there, and sometimes you have to kind of work it under there. I'm having a little trouble with this one. There. So I'm prying this way to push it that way. And you can kind of hear it when it pops loose. There. And then again, it kind of sticks up in the top. And you can see that as I push it that way, it kind of comes out. You can see where it was underneath. You can see the little indentation right there. So it comes out like that, and then this part sort of slides down. And you can see again that it's what holds this dash down. So we'll just move this out of the way. Again, you can see the little clips that are holding it in there. And of course, when we put it back, it pops in real easy.
Good.
Okay, so there's a kick panel on this side, and likewise there are 3 little tabs that cover the screws, same as on the other side. We got to take those off. And they're the Phillips screws.
Okay.
Once I get those 3 screws out, there's a similar gray kind of a retaining thing on that side, and then there's one up near the emergency brake switch. And on this car, someone has replaced it, let me see, with just a sheet metal screw. Okay. Okay, so once we've gotten those 5 screws out, this kick panel comes right out too. We'll set that aside. Now, this blue wire isn't normal. I've made some changes to this with our little system for warning lights that we could talk about, and so don't worry about that blue wire. That's not typical. Now the next thing we're going to do is we have to pull the headlight switch out, and we have to pull a little chain. This release has a chain that operates the emergency brake release, and we have to pull that chain off of the little thing, and you can just reach up under there with your hand. It's just a little link that you have to remove. It takes about 2 seconds. If you get a drop light, you can see it, but it's just hooked into a little fork like that. The link drops down into a little fork. It comes right off. So we need to remove that. And then the next thing we need to do is take this headlamp switch off. Now, if you can pry this thing right off. Sometimes they'll just pull right off. Yeah, that thing is just keyed, and so the little switch cover pulls right off, and this is where we need this 24mm socket. I've used a big pair of needle nose. If you don't have a 24mm socket, what we need to do is take that nut off, and if you have a 24mm socket, that's the right size. If you don't, a pair of needle nose will take it off if you're patient, because usually not that tight. Take the nut off. Switch just pulls right out from the back. Pull it out and get it out of the way. Now be careful. Those wires are hot. You don't want to get any screwdriver around that or anything. I just usually screw the nut back on the switch. We're just going to let the switch dangle there, but there is a live 12 volts connected to that, so you want to be careful and not touch it with a screwdriver. And now, in a similar way, we have a couple of 10mm nuts. At least one. There's not one in the middle, it doesn't look like, but there's one on the side right here. Remember, we had a socket, and we need to take that nut off, or that bolt rather. We'll have to do all this in reverse, and I'll assume that you'll remember that you need to put all these back. But we need to take that bolt out, just set it down on the floorboard. And now we're going to take the instrument cluster out. As you recall, the way I do it, I don't use those hooks. I just put my hand up behind that instrument cluster and push it out. That way I can get the speedometer cable off, and once I get the speedometer cable off, I can work from the top. Now what I typically do also is I throw a towel down here so I don't scratch that plastic. Let me see if I can find a towel before we take that off. The instrument cluster out. You can, if you get behind there, oops, that one has already been out several times. I'm going to have to glue that back. You can see that I can push it right out. And then there's a nut, and it should only be finger tight behind that instrument cluster. And of course I unscrew it counterclockwise, and now I've got it off. And once I get it off, then the instrument cluster will just push right out of there. And now I have to be careful, kind of keep that towel out of my way. And actually what I'll do is take the towel and be very careful, but I think we'll only be able to film it if we take the towel out of the way. I'll just have to be careful that I don't scratch this up. At the top, there's the connection for this, it's a sensor for the cruise control, and it's a plug, and it needs to be pulled off, and it's got a couple of little tangs on there, and it'd be easier if I could move it around in this direction. And we need to pull two little plugs off right there. I'll pull that off in a minute. The clock connection is right there. That's also 12 volts hot, but it's pretty well protected. And then there's a connection for the tack right there. And then you can see these tangs. If I can push them in from the top, I can get them to release typically. This one can be stubborn. Sometimes what we need is a little screwdriver, if I can find one behind it.
Back on.
Okay.
Back on.
Well, we finally got that particular plug off. You can see that those tangs, you have to push on the back right here, and as Gordon pointed out to me, sometimes with those gloves on there, the sensitivity of my fingers is not good enough to feel when I'm on there. But anyway, they press and it comes off. And the last thing we have to take off, and I've already pulled the plug off, as you can see, there's a main plug that plugs all the electrical connections to the instrument panel. It just pops right off. And the last thing I'm pulling off of here is it's a 10 millimeter connection, 10 millimeter open end wrench takes it off. It's the oil pressure line. And of course, once we take the oil pressure line off there, we certainly can't start the car. That would pump oil all over the place. You have to be careful. Now actually, none of it will leak out either. Might get a drop or two.
When you, now that we got that off, can you point out the speedometer and where the speedometer plugs in?
Yes, I will as soon as I get that off. Okay, so now let's take this out of there and let me point out once I get it off. You can see that what I was removing with my fingers was the nut that screwed the speedometer cable on, and if we look at where that is, it's right here. And we don't have any room with that speedometer cable. We've just got to undo it with our fingers from behind, and that's what I always do rather than use those hooks that they sell. Now you can see these wouldn't normally be on your Mercedes. I've put these in there. Those are warning lamps that I use to indicate loss of oil pressure or loss of water, and we have a little kit that we provide that allows you to install that, and it's a real lifesaver in terms of that engine. In case you don't notice that your gauges are reading no oil pressure, no water, it gives you a little, what we always used to call immediate light. Anyway, we set the instrument cluster aside here, and then one of the things that's real easy to remove is this little ring. We don't have to pull the ignition switch out, but there's a little ring and we can pull it right off, and you can see that it's just got little tangs that hold it in there, and you can see that once it pulls off, this instrument cluster will pull out away from that ignition switch. Now the ignition switch, of course, is right there. If I pull some of this insulation aside, we might be able to see it. I don't know. We can certainly see it once we get it out. But you see, that's the entire ignition switch behind there. And if you ever had to change the ignition switch, one of the things I do is just pull this instrument cluster out, and then you can't change it. While we're here on this side, what we want to do is pull the little rubber thing that connects the heater box or the air conditioning box to there off. And so that we just have to put our hand behind there, and you'll feel that little rubber connection pulls right off of there. So once we've got that off, now let's I think I've got one more, I'm not sure, I might have one more bolt to take off down here. Let me look. Okay, we're getting near the end here. Now I'm on the other side, and one of the things I need to do is this little sensor for the climate control system has to come out of there. Now it pushes out from the bottom. You can pry it out from the top, but you still got a connection that you got to pull off. So if you pull off the connection on the bottom from over here on this side, you can see it'll come off, and you just kind of have to wiggle that connection off. There's a little electrical plug there. Let's set that aside. And then finally, you need to pop this thing out. You need to take these switches off. I popped it out from the back, but I left the switches in there so you could see how to get it out of there. Once you pop it out from the back, then you can see that the switches, you can lay the whole thing out. That's the way I always like to take these switches out, rather than, I mean, it's a little more work. You got to pull the glove box out first, but rather than put a pry tool underneath these switches and damage the wood, if you reach your hand in from the back and push this thing out like that and keep the switches in there, then you can individually from the back push these switches out, and they have a connection for the lamp, in other words, there's a little fiber cable that runs the lamp, the light that lights, it's a backlighting for these things. And there's one of those plus the connection. They'll only go back on there one way, so I'm not real particular. If I don't remember which goes where, it's not a big consequence. Of course, what I could do is reverse these connections and get them in a different spot than they were originally, but of course, that's not a real big deal either. But if you're familiar with your Mercedes, you probably remember which belongs in which position. At any rate, we'll just unplug each of them. We're getting near the end here. Pull each of the cables off, each of the connectors. And now, we've got access to the screws that are holding this thing on there. There's a couple of sheet metal screws that are some of my last ones. And so, if I disconnect those. And of course, the other thing I did when I pull that instrument panel out, you got to remember to do is the air conditioning vent hose that was over there on that side. I pulled it off through the access panel as the instrument cluster was gone. Now I believe we've got all the screws loose that hold this thing on there. Now it's held on there in such a way that the defroster vents are connected on the back, and so what we have to do, and sometimes we have to kind of work it, what we have to do is work it from the front up so that we can disconnect those, and we have to work kind of both sides of it at once. But if we work it out of there, you kind of jiggle it, you can see I worked it loose. One of the things that I hadn't cut was a little tie wrap that held this little pipe. Little pipe blows air from the fan in the climate control system onto this little sensor up here, and there's a little tie wrap that was holding it to the top. I just took a pair of dikes and cut it. And now I do have it loose, and I do believe that one last helpful comment. Now we've got this thing off of here, but the book doesn't say to drop the steering wheel, but I've always found that useful. So there's just 2 bolts. Now that we've got it off, you can see where they are, and they're not hard to find, even with the thing on there, even with the dash on there. So you see, if we take these 2 13mm nuts off of this thing, the steering column drops down, and it just drops down a little bit. It doesn't take much. Maybe it needs to drop about 1 inch. But once you do that, then you can clear the steering column much easier. And that procedure is not really in the manual, but it sure is useful. Now, while I've got it off, I'll just put those back on there. We'll tighten that up later when we put it back together. Now you can see that we've got a whole array of things that we can work on underneath here.